going to hell down here in Texas.
Oh yeah, what's up everybody? This is your boy, Big Bad Bob, with you for another exciting episode of the Lone Gunman Podcast. This is episode 229er. That's right, cranking them out, baby. Let's get it. Alright, so on this episode, we're going to try a little something different. And if it goes somewhat sideways, then I'll go ahead and apologize now for it. But through the magic of technology, folks, I want to do a reaction podcast to a History Channel show about the assassination in real time, as we follow along with it. As you might know, if you've ever watched just about any documentary on mainstream television, there's always a catch. There's always some bullshit. There's always something shady that they're trying to put out there. So with that being said, I want to try to do this in real time and call them on their bullshit right away, because with a lot of these shows, and the show in particular we're going to be talking about here today is, what the hell is this show called? Huh, hold on.
Tonight, the assassination that shook our country to its core.
It was just a shock that caused everybody to stop and think for a moment about how the world had changed.
Police quickly catch the culprit, but many believe there's more to the story.
The first question any good theorist asks is, who wants Kennedy dead?
Now, we'll explore the top theories surrounding one of America's most shocking events.
So he was convinced that Kennedy was killed by enemies high in his own government.
He believed that Fidel Castro orchestrated the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Is there a conspiracy behind John F. Kennedy's assassination? And if so, who is really responsible for his death?
Okay, it's History's Greatest Mysteries with your host, Lawrence Fishburne. And you heard a couple of the talking heads in this series, and I will identify them as they pop up here. One of them is definitely Jefferson Morley. The other one, I'm not too sure about who this guy is, but they love to have podcasters on their show to explain certain events about history. Now, why they didn't get a legitimate Kennedy assassination podcaster, to come on the show and do this, I don't know. Because several of these people, after 35 years of research into the Kennedy assassination, I've never heard of you. And if I've never heard of you, then you haven't done shit. And you don't deserve to be on television talking about it. Especially with, I'm sure, some of the crap that's going to come falling out of some of your mouths. Now, full disclosure, I have not watched this before. I saw it. It first aired back in February. And I've been waiting to record it on a rerun And that's how we are listening now. So just bear with me. I'm hoping there's not going to be a bunch of commercials, and I just don't know how this is going to go. But let's just dive right into it, shall we? And I'm going to mute. Well, I don't know if I can mute my microphone and do this at the same time or what. I don't know. Let's try.
Dallas, Texas, November 22nd, 1963. At 11:25 a.m., President John F. Kennedy arrives on Air Force One.
President Kennedy goes to Dallas to give a lunchtime speech at a convention center known as the Trade Mart. Between his arrival at Love Field and his speech, he's to believe.
Now, the person speaking right now is Phil Shendon. Phil Shendon. I believe he has written a book or two about the Kennedy assassination. And so far, they have to set the table, of course, for all the people who don't know shit about the assassination. So we're going to get the basics out of the way here with Phil Shendon.
Motorcade through the center of downtown Dallas.
The motorcade has over 12 cars. Kennedy is riding in a 3-road Lincoln Continental.
Okay. The guy talking now is Patrick Hines, co-host of the True Crime Obsessed podcast. Okay? True Crime Obsessed podcast. Never heard of it. But here we go. Let's see what he knows about the Kennedy assassination.
3-road Lincoln Continental convertible limousine with the top down.
President Kennedy and Mrs. Kennedy are in the back seat. President Kennedy on the right side, Mrs. Kennedy on the left. Ahead of them are Texas Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie. And ahead of them are 2 Secret Service agents. One of them is driving.
It's a very sort of warm reception for Kennedy. There's something like 200,000 people lined.
Okay, now talking is Ben Cowan, professor of history, University of California at San Diego. Never heard of you, pal. Let's see if you know what the fuck you're talking about.
Group, so it is no small turnout.
And at one point, Mrs. Connally in the car says, "You can't say Dallas doesn't love you, can you?" And President Kennedy replies, "No, you certainly can't."
Those are his last words.
The motorcade comes down Main Street to the end of Main Street where it hits Dealey Plaza, takes a sharp right turn on Commerce Street, and then a sharp left turn in front of the Texas School Book Depository. And it's at that moment that the first gunshots are heard.
There's Jefferson Moreland.
A gunshot rings out, and then 2 more. Both President Kennedy and Governor Connally are hit. 2 shots hit Kennedy. The first enters his upper back and comes out through his throat, and then the second enters the back of his skull.
He is rushed to...
Okay, so they're parroting the magic bullet scenario. At least Mr. Professor of history there, Ben Cowan, is towing the company line. Here we go.
Parkland Memorial Hospital. That's where he would soon be declared dead at the age of 46.
Connally is also gravely injured but survives. 1 hour after the shooting, Kennedy's death is officially announced to the media.
As word spreads of this, everybody stops where they are. People.
Okay, this is Eve Pomporis, a former female Secret Service agent. And smoke show freaking gorgeous, by the way. Okay, let's see if she knows what she's talking about. And you know what, Eve? It doesn't matter if you know what you're talking about at this point. You are so hot. Okay, here we go.
There's a lot of screaming, there's chaos, and just a lot of fear
Ben,
and confusion.
damn it.
It was just a shock that caused everybody to stop and think for a moment about how the world had changed.
Any divisiveness or any fractions within the country, everybody just comes together in this moment to grieve.
As the world stops to mourn, a manhunt begins.
As soon as it's clear that President Kennedy's been hit and the motorcade rushes out of Dealey Plaza, the police go interview eyewitnesses. And perhaps the most important witness of that day was a steam fitter, a Dallas man named Howard Brennan, who says that he saw a man with a rifle on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository.
Deputy Constable Seymour Weitzman and Deputy Sheriff Eugene Boone rush inside the book depository.
There, they find quite literally the smoking gun.
They find a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, an Italian-made rifle, and they also find 3 spent cartridges.
Did they? Did they though? They just they just kind of glazed over the whole what's his face, Marion Baker supposed encounter, and they got Boone and Weitzman rushing upstairs to find a man that actually they thought they found a Mauser, and there is a little bit of a discrepancy about the shells, but we'll get into that in a future show. But let's continue towing the company line.
That somebody had just fired 3 bullets from the 6th floor. They find the books have been moved around to create sort of a sniper's perch. They also find a 38.
All right, bullshit, Phil Shendon. There's your first bullshit alert. Bullshit alert. They didn't move cartons around to create a sniper's nest. They moved the cartons around to create space on the floor because they were replacing the fucking floor on the 6th floor that day. You have to move books out of the way to clear the floor. So you move them towards the edges of the walls so you can replace the floorboards. Let's continue. I guess Phil Shendon is a lone nut author. Let's go.
38-inch brown paper bag.
The shooter escapes, but building staff identify a prime suspect.
An employee at the Texas School Book Depository, Phil Wesley Frazier, offers a colleague a trip into downtown Dallas on the morning of the assassination, and the colleague is carrying a long brown paper bag in which he says he has curtain rods.
The manager in the building, Roy Truly, looks around and he sees that one of his employees is actually missing. It's the same man who brought in that suspicious brown paper bag that morning.
It's Lee Harvey Oswald. Police radio his description to all city units.
So it's been...
So now Roy Truly comes to the conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald is missing from the roll call. This old song and dance. Okay. So now, actually, they put out the description based on Howard Brennan's shitty generic description before that. But then I guess at some point they might have put out a description of Lee Harvey Oswald. About as nondescript as you can get. Here we go.
It's been an hour since President Kennedy was shot. And thanks to the quick work of the Dallas PD, they actually have a promising lead. 3 shots fired, 3 spent shell casings, found next to a rifle that they believe was brought in by Lee Harvey Oswald, who is the only person who has fled that book depository. Every other employee is there still actually talking to investigators.
Bullshit. Bullshit, Eve. I love you, but you're wrong. Many of the depository workers had left as much as an hour after the shots. Many were told that they could go home, in fact, and many were not ever interviewed by the Warren Commission or the Dallas police. Here we go.
It appears that Oswald is the man responsible for the assassination.
The Dallas Police Department sends out a message to be on the lookout for somebody who looks like Lee Harvey Oswald. And Officer J.D. Tippett is in a patrol car about 3 miles away. He sees a man on the side of the road who appears to fit the description of the man who's been identified in Dealey Plaza as the president's assassin. The police officer tries to stop this man and is gunned down by him. And this man, according to many witnesses, is Lee Harvey Oswald.
Police had any doubt that Lee Harvey Oswald...
I like the generic many witnesses. Look, there was a lot of witnesses to the Tippett shooting, and just about none of them saw the same thing. Some people saw 2 people. Some people saw somebody that they would identify as Lee Harvey Oswald. Some people said they couldn't identify him as Lee Harvey Oswald. Some people say he was wearing different clothes, ran in different directions, just you name it. But continue, Phil Shendon.
Assassinated President Kennedy,
Or Eve,
that
sorry.
doubt is gone the moment he killed Officer Tippit.
A local merchant named Johnny Brewer has seen this man duck into the local.
I like how they conveniently leave out the word allegedly. You know, they've got this guy etched in stone already. It's frustrating.
Into the local movie theater. A little bit before 2 p.m., police officers find Oswald seated there. He's armed. He puts up a struggle before he's arrested.
One of the arresting officers, Nick McDonald, testifies that as they reach him, Oswald raises his pistol and pulls the trigger. But McDonald grabs the gun just as the hammer falls, hitting the webbing between his thumb and index finger, probably saving his life.
Oswald is brought to the police and court.
And if you believe that one there, buddy, then I got some swampland to sell you in Nebraska. Here we go.
Building in downtown Dallas and charged for both murders.
Subsequent investigation uncovers a lot more evidence that actually implicates Oswald. They find a photo of Oswald that was taken by his wife, where he's holding a rifle that matches the murder weapon.
Oswald had made a fake ID in the name of Alec Heidel. The rifle that was found in the school book depository had been ordered in the name of Alec Heidel and sent to a post office box in that name.
Virtually all of the ballistics evidence points to
Jefferson Morley, you're our only hope. Don't fail us, buddy.
Oswald as the gunman in Dealey Plaza. His palm prints are found on the weapons, and the bullets fired in Dealey Plaza almost certainly came out of the rifle that's found on the 6th floor.
But none of this evidence is ever presented.
I like these almost certainly, inevitably. Come on, man. Come on.
in court.
So Oswald is held in custody downtown. He's interrogated by the FBI, the Secret Service, the Dallas Police Department, the Dallas District Attorney's Office. He goes through rounds of questioning. What we know from those interrogations that he lies again and again and again, and he insists he had nothing to do with the president's murder.
Then something absolutely...
Okay, he lies again and again and again and again. Hopefully everybody out there has read all different versions of Fritz's bookouts, Hosties, interrogation notes. And if you read them, Oswald's pretty damn truthful in there. The only thing he will not say is that I shot the president or I killed a police officer. He pretty much cops to everything else, including living in Russia, including having a Russian wife. He tells them exactly where he was that day, what he was wearing, when he left, why he left, the whole 9 yards. These people have no idea what they're talking about.
Absolutely crazy happens.
What?
Sunday morning, November 24th, police are actually ready to transfer Oswald to the county jail. They have an armored car ready in the basement of the building.
And as he's being brought out in front of the TV cameras, Jack Ruby, owner of a local nightclub, steps out of the crowd with a .45 and shoots Oswald once in the stomach on national TV.
Ruby is arrested, and Oswald is taken to the same hospital as Kennedy, where, less than 48 hours after the president, he's declared dead as well.
Oswald's death on November 24th means that there will never be a trial, never an opportunity to resolve an awful lot of the evidence that points to Oswald as the gunman in Dealey Plaza.
New president, Lyndon Johnson, establishes a commission to investigate the assassination, becomes known as the Warren Commission.
It's sort of the ultimate blue ribbon commission. Among the other members are the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Alan Dulles, as well as a young congressman from Michigan by the name of Gerald Ford.
The Warren Commission works for nearly a year, compiling evidence, gathering information.
9 months.
And on September 24th, 1964, they present an 888-page report to President Johnson.
The Warren Commission expresses no doubt. They state that Lee Harvey Oswald is the only man responsible for JFK's death.
They also find that Jack Ruby acted alone in killing Oswald. But over the years, a lot of people have questioned these findings, saying that they might appear to be a little too neat.
Making this report far from the last word on JFK. Coming up, a new investigation leads to a bombshell.
The House committee uses a word, and that word is conspiracy.
And later, a surprising suspect has his day in court.
They worked together to plan the assassination.
The new Chase Ink Business Premier card is made for people like Sam who make...
Okay, I guess we are getting commercials, so I'll try to turn them down here as much as I can. I cannot fast forward through the commercials, but we can kind of touch base on. Okay, so they covered the basics. They laid out the official Warren Commission version of the story of events. So it sounds to me like they're going to get ready to get into some conspiracy theories, maybe. It sounds like they're definitely going to be touching on the HSCA investigation, which did indeed find that it was a probable conspiracy, despite the whole definer word probable. But a lot of people forget about the HSCA investigation, especially a lot of the lone nutters. And there's a lot of good information that came out of the HSCA. Hopefully they get into it in this thing. We will see. It's hard to say, but so far I'm not impressed with anybody on here, to be honest with you, except Jefferson Morley. He has said some basic facts, nothing controversial or anything, but stated the fact that that rifle was supposedly ordered by Lee Harvey Oswald in the name of Alec Heidel. He had fake selective service credentials in the name of Alec Heidel and had created a Sampling for Cuba committee with the president of Alec Heidel. So, we'll see. I'm not impressed with these other folks on here, though, especially Phil Shinden, but we'll see what he has to say. He might redeem himself, folks. You never know. In the next part of the show, we'll just have to see. And yes, I'm currently pandering through a Lexus commercial. So, yeah, I'm just bullshit talking away. Now it's a Sheets commercial with a preacher man really wanting to put a lot of food on his hamburger order. And I don't blame him. You can't live denying yourself all the time, sir. Sometimes you just gotta live. Go get 2 times the meat, bruh. Yep, get them things. Get them pickles. Get them onions. Put it on there. Put some lettuce on there. Double cheese. Throw some bacon on there. Oh, yeah. Don't be scared. Why the Sheets not? Disclaimer, I'm not in any way, shape, or form sponsored by Sheets. Although, if you would like to sponsor me, Sheets, I would gladly take it. I'm a huge fan. All right, I think we're almost back here, folks. Let's see.
Now on History Vault, commercial free. Watch them now.
Okay,
When
we're
the
back.
Warren
Here
Commission
we go.
releases its findings in 1964, it marks the end of the official investigation into the JFK assassination.
They find that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in killing President John F. Kennedy.
But that answer doesn't satisfy the public for long.
Skeptics write books, first a trickle of books and then a flood of books questioning the findings of the report and leading to a larger distrust itself and in the sort of firmament of American government.
After 12
Skeptics, not skeptics, researchers looking for the truthful answer. We are not just going to take the word of all these highfalutin folks that are appointed to head a commission and just take their findings because they say so. That is some sheep-like behavior, Professor. UC San Diego.
Scrutiny. The U.S. government takes action.
House Select Committee on Assassinations was created in 1976.
Committee takes a closer look at the Warren Commission report.
They agree with most of what the Warren Commission says, particularly regarding the evidence against Oswald. They're confident that Oswald did shoot Kennedy from the 6th floor of the book depository.
But they uncover a new piece of evidence.
Assassination researchers in Dallas came to the committee and said it may be that the sound of the gunshots was captured on this policeman's radio recording.
So the committee has multiple acoustic experts go over this recording, and upon first listen, they think, actually, there weren't 3 shots, as previously thought, but 4. 3 shots did, in fact, come from the Texas School Book Depository, but that 1 shot came from a grassy knoll in front of the motorcade.
Theory number 2.
Oswald didn't act alone. And if he didn't act alone, someone planned this killing with him. And if so, who was it? The House committee used a word that will become connected to the Kennedy assassination from then on. The word they use is conspiracy.
So the audio evidence that seems to point to a conspiracy is later disputed, and in many minds it is found to be completely in error. But it's almost too late to put the toothpaste back in the tube. That the idea of conspiracy is now even further cemented in the minds of millions of Americans.
If the JFK...
Okay, Phil Shannon, way to backwalk the HSCA committee findings. You know, they had the best of the best audio experts analyzing this acoustical evidence and determining what they found to be the case. And you could just throw all that away by saying, well, some people disagree with it, so it doesn't mean anything. Okay. Sure thing, pal. That's a cruel and shocking act, folks. And that, what we call an ironic pun by your boy, Big Bad Bob. Here we go.
Of Americans.
If the JFK assassination is a conspiracy, who's behind it?
Almost immediately after the shooting, one conspiracy theory rises to the top. So while there's only circumstantial evidence to prove it, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence.
Even Lyndon Johnson did at some point make an aside to an ABC News reporter that he believed that Fidel Castro orchestrated the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Why is Fidel Castro a suspect? Let's start with motive. At the time of the assassination, there is no foreign power with a bigger grudge against Kennedy than Castro.
President Kennedy is so determined to get rid of Castro that he tells the CIA to go forward with an invasion of Cuba that becomes known as the Bay of Pigs operation. They send Cuban exiles into Cuba with the CIA support to oust Castro. It's a debacle. And afterwards, certainly...
All right, time out. Kennedy inherited the Bay of Pigs. He did not want to turn this into what could potentially be World War III by providing official government-backed war machines to destroy Cuba, which easily could have happened. You know, anytime we could have taken out Cuba in the blink of an eye. Oh. But then again, you have Russia standing behind Cuba. So the Russians would see this as an affront, an attack on communism and their allies. And Russia would have to strike back. And then we would have to strike back at Russia. And then all hell is going to break loose. So, you know, they say President Kennedy was hell bent on getting rid of Castro. That's not true. It's just simply not true. He was trying to have back channel conversations with Castro. You know, people talk about Castro like he's a monster. Okay. Many people were imprisoned in Castro prisons. They did things directly, you know, against Castro, and they were released. by Castro. Now, sure, a lot of them ended up in front of the firing squad and killed, but, you know, in a revolution, those things are going to happen. And I'm sure in Castro's eyes, it was well deserved. But it's not like he just lined people up and killed them like a monster, like you know, some Hitler-esque type dude. And you know, behind the scenes, the CIA was behind the Bay of Pigs. It was a fiasco. Okay, and in the ensuing years, the CIA kept trying to kill Castro, despite the Kennedys not wanting them to do so. You know, when the CIA enlists the help of the mafia, okay, to kill Castro, and Bobby Kennedy is trying to prosecute La Cosa Nostra in the supreme, and you know, in the biggest judicial courts of the world. Um, all they have to do is say, "Look, why you busting my balls?" The boys over at the CIA gave us $100,000 to go take care of Castro for you. We're on the same side here. We're working for you. So why you busting our balls? Let's continue.
Certainly, Castro knows that President Kennedy is so determined to remove him from power that he had actually ordered an invasion of his country.
Documents that are later declassified reveal more evidence.
After the Bay of Pigs invasion fails, the Kennedy administration, through the CIA, tried to kill Castro in the most exotic of ways. Everything from poisoned cigars to poisoned skin diving.
Homeboy, it's not the Kennedys calling the shots here. Do you understand that? Bobby was pissed that the CIA was using mafia figures to try to assassinate Castro. Sure, they may have said, okay, CIA, you do what you got to do. But they didn't know that they were going to be enlisting the help of mafia figures to do it. That's the stupidest move. Come on, CIA. You don't have some badass CIA secret agents that can take care of this shit on your own. You gotta pay the mafia to do your dirty work for you. Come on.
Skin diving suits to exploding seashells. But yes, certainly Castro knew the presidency was plotting against him.
So we know that Fidel Castro has reason to want to see President Kennedy dead. And the question in all the years since is, what role did Lee Harvey Oswald play in whatever plot was developed to try to kill the president?
During their investigation, the Warren Commission conducts a thorough background check on Oswald.
Even when he's serving in the Marine Corps for 3 years, Lee Harvey Oswald is not shy about the fact that he's a Marxist. So much so, his colleagues in the Marine Corps used to refer to him as Oswaldovich.
In 1959, he defects to the Soviet Union and marries 19-year-old Soviet citizen Marina Prusakova, and they have a child. They live there until 1962 in an apartment just a few blocks away from where the Soviets are training Cuban spies and soldiers.
Back in the U.S., in April of 1963, Oswald goes down to New Orleans. There, he tries to start up a pro-Castro activist group.
It's clear that Oswald likes communism, but the biggest revelation for investigators is that it turns out that Oswald went to Mexico City in September of 1963, which of course is just 2 months before JFK's assassination. And
Oswald's not pro-communism. He's a Marxist. Okay? He was protesting the way that we, the United States, and the rest of the world as a nation are treating Cuba for trying to do things their way. You know, there's a major some major subterfuge going on here to disrupt the economy of Cuba. There's some major things going on, embargoes and the like, and denial of exports. And you know, they're purposely making life really, really hard for Cuba and Fidel Castro to thrive. And that is what Oswald is protesting.
while there, had contact with officials at the Cuban embassy.
According to author Gus Russo, during these meetings, Oswald makes a chilling offer.
Russo talks to various sources, including an FBI case officer who has two high-level informants within the Communist Party. And these two informants are two brothers by the names of Morris and Jack Childs.
The Childs brothers meet with Fidel Castro after the Kennedy assassination and learn just how much Fidel Castro knew about Lee Harvey Oswald in the weeks before the assassination.
According to Russo's research, Oswald tells embassy officials, "I'll kill that bastard Kennedy" when he goes to Dallas. Castro is immediately informed about this. The embassy staff calls him up and they ask him, "What do we do?" Castro denies taking Oswald up on his offer.
I don't think there's any credible evidence that Fidel Castro played any role in ordering President Kennedy's assassination, but I think it's clear that he was well aware before the assassination. Lee Harvey Oswald had marched into a Cuban embassy in Mexico City and made the statement that he was going to kill Kennedy.
Russo keeps digging.
Russo speaks to some former...
Okay. Oswald did not march into the Cuban embassy and claim that he was going to kill Kennedy. This allegedly happened in the Soviet embassy in Mexico City. And he was more worried about the FBI hounding him to death and him wanting to go back to Russia, or him wanting to go to Cuba and then back to Russia. So let's continue with the story they're creating here.
Cuban spies that tell him that when Oswald makes this offer, they actually encourage him. One officer tells Russo that they offer Oswald money and then tell him that they'll help him evacuate if he's successful doing this.
Oswald's end goal is to get a visa to get either to Cuba or to the Soviet Union or both. And eventually the Cubans do give him some form of temporary visa in October of 1963.
But according to Russo's findings, they don't actually intend to bring Oswald to Cuba. They plan to pick him up and kill him and then dump his body in the Gulf of Mexico.
According to Gus Russo, there's more evidence to support this claim.
Okay.
Russo finds reports
I'm
of
all
a
ears.
private plane sitting on an airfield in Dallas on November 22nd. And that plane takes off for Havana after the assassination. As we know, Oswald is not on that plane, but that might be where he's headed when he encounters Officer Tippit, and the entire Cuban plan changes after that.
So that's the theory. The Warren Commission and also the later House Committee on Assassinations dismissed the idea that Castro or the Cuban government could have been responsible for the killing of JFK.
And today, Oswald, Castro, Johnson, they're all dead. So I say any hopes of proving this theory are gone.
Coming up, investigators dig up evidence of a different mastermind.
Is the Soviet Union, led by Premier Nikita Khrushchev, involved in JFK's assassination?
Otherwise, why is Oswald meeting with a KGB assassinations expert?
What really became of Blackbeard's?
Oh, my Lord, my Lord, my Lord. So we go from Castro being behind the assassination to next is going to be Khrushchev and Russia. I can't wait for that. But I'm not going to pander my way through commercials this time. I'm going to pause it and we'll come back after the commercials. It'll only be like a second for you guys, but an eternity for me. Here we go. All right, we're back, folks. Here we go.
Harvey Oswald visits Mexico City in the fall of 1963. Investigators are desperate to know what he's up to.
He makes several visits to the Cuban embassy. What happens there? Are the Cubans involved? You have to ask, right?
But the Cuban embassy isn't the only place Oswald visits in Mexico.
While in Mexico City, he also goes to the Soviet embassy in his quest for a visa, and he ends up kind of bouncing back and forth between the Cuban embassy and the Soviet embassy.
So Oswald, in visiting the Soviet embassy, is taken to meet with a Valery Kostakov. Oswald has one meeting on September 28th with Kostakov, and they have a subsequent telephone conversation on October 1st.
Authorities dig into Kostakov's background, and they make a chilling discovery.
Valery Kostakov is actually a KGB agent and a KGB assassinations expert. Doesn't that suggest that this man, Lee Harvey Oswald, is up to no good?
So that leads us to the next big question, which is the Soviet Union, led by Premier Nikita Khrushchev, involved in JFK's assassination.
Let me pause here and just say it's not out of the realm of possibility that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't even in Mexico City at all, and that he was impersonated by someone claiming to be Lee Harvey Oswald. And the U.S. authorities at the time weren't scrambling to figure out who this guy was. They were simply conducting routine maintenance and reporting on what they found. It was not until after the assassination that all hell broke loose, and they were backtracking and trying to figure things out. As we all know, through great spy movies and CIA lore, that most employees of foreign embassies are CIA agents. Okay, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that foreign employees of their respective embassies and consulates are their own intelligence assets in place. And at the time, Mexico City was a very important hub for intelligence. So with that being said, let's get back to the theory that Kennedy was killed by Khrushchev, which is horseshit. But here we go.
Khrushchev may have a motive to kill Kennedy that's just as strong as Fidel Castro's. As we know, Kennedy is on a crusade against communism, and communism is represented on the world stage by its biggest superpower, the USSR.
Premier Khrushchev is trying to promote revolution and communism around the world, and JFK is trying to do the exact opposite. So these two are pitted against each other at a geopolitical level. And unfortunately for JFK, 90 miles from the Florida coastline, the Soviets have a communist nation in the form of Cuba.
Communist Cuba would not have happened without the Soviets. They give the Cubans training, financial, and military support. Castro's victory is also a victory for Khrushchev.
Then in 1962, Khrushchev experiences a very public defeat, thanks to President Kennedy.
A year before Kennedy's death, the United States and the Soviet Union had almost gone to war when the Soviet Union attempts to set up missile launch pads in Cuba that can be used for nuclear weapons.
Kennedy isn't okay with Soviet nukes 90 miles away, and this begins what's known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, which ultimately, after a lot of back and forth political posturing, Kennedy wins.
2 years later, in 1964, Khrushchev is removed from office.
Before he's removed in 1963, Khrushchev is still clinging to power, looking for a way to redeem himself among the communists.
That would certainly add some logic to the idea that maybe the Khrushchev wanted to see Kennedy dead.
If Oswald walks right into the embassy and offers to kill Kennedy in Dallas, maybe the Soviets go for it. Otherwise, why is he meeting with a KGB assassinations expert?
There is an even further out theory, which is that Khrushchev started plotting to kill Kennedy even before the Mexico City machinations.
Author and attorney Michael Edo.
So, just to put this into some perspective, okay, William Harvey, he was basically our version of the CIA's James Bond, and the literal proponent of the ZR rifle program, runner of QJ Win. So anybody that talked to William Harvey should automatically be suspect. Is that's what you're saying here? Like Harvey would have been stationed in, say, Harvey was stationed in Rome at the Italian embassy or the U.S. embassy in Rome. So anybody that went there and talked to him should automatically be suspect because he is the assassination expert for the United States CIA. Okay. No, that's just where he was stationed. Just like Mexico City is where Vostokov was stationed. And it just so happens that's where allegedly Lee Harvey Oswald, or an imposter, went. Let's continue. Michael Edo.
Here's details of his investigation in the 1977 book, The Oswald File.
Michael Eddowes comes up with this theory that Khrushchev conceives of this plot to kill Kennedy when Oswald is still living in the Soviet Union beginning in 1959.
Khrushchev realizes he's got a golden opportunity on his hands. Here, he's got an American citizen, former Marine, an avowed communist who speaks Russian. And everybody knows he's there in the USSR. The Associated Press had reported on his defection.
Eddowes believes that Khrushchev detains and kills Oswald while in the USSR, then replaces him with a KGB agent, someone who looks very similar.
So it's not Lee Harvey Oswald who lands back in the United States in 1962. It's an imposter whose mission it is to kill John F. Kennedy.
Eddowes believes he has definitive proof that Oswald was replaced.
On his Marine records, Oswald is listed as being 5'11", but that the person who killed Kennedy is actually 5'9".
The original Oswald also had a cranial operation as a child, leaving him with an indentation behind his ear and a dime-sized hole in his skull.
But according to Eddowes, the autopsy on the Kennedy assassin shows no such features. It does, however, show that the assassin has a large scar on his wrist, which Eddowes notes the original Oswald did not have.
His argument persuades the Texas courts and Oswald's widow, Marina, to have his body exhumed.
So this is huge news. Eddowes has managed to convince, authorities and Lee Harvey Oswald's widow that there's something to this theory.
So in 1981, they dig up the body, and it's in an advanced state of decomposition. Eddowes and widow Marina Oswald agree to have the Dallas County medical examiner, Linda Norton, do the examination.
Dr. Norton is able to match dental records and also identify the evidence of the childhood cranial surgery, which together show that actually the body in the grave really is that of Lee Harvey Oswald.
So Khrushchev didn't replace Lee Harvey Oswald with another killer. That much we know. But the Soviet conspiracy theory is still alive and well, because it doesn't prove that Oswald himself didn't work with the USSR to plan and execute the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
But that's not what the House committee says. In their 1976 report, they find that neither the Cubans nor the Soviets are behind the assassination. But they do think that somebody else could be involved.
Coming up, could fresh evidence point to a new motive?
Russo testifies that he remembers them saying that they were going to kill Kennedy and that they were going to use something called a triangulation of shooters.
Here we go. Stay tuned. We will be back after the break.
Years, one detail in the JFK investigation remains undisputed. Lee Harvey.
We are back. And why they wasted time on Castro theory and the Russian theory, I don't know. But let's see what the next one's all about. We're on a roll, folks.
About Oswald.
Recently declassified intelligence reports reveal that the KGB does their own investigation into Oswald. They have him under very tight surveillance from the moment he enters the USSR. So they have a lot of intelligence on him. And according to the KGB report, contrary to what we've all been led to believe, Oswald stops being a communist sympathizer.
The KGB reports that over his time in the Soviet Union, Oswald actually becomes disillusioned with the cause. And by the time he leaves in 1962, he is not a communist anymore.
This goes against decades of conventional thinking about Oswald and the assassination. If he's not a communist, then who killed JFK?
So the KGB does believe that Oswald killed Kennedy. They do say that they think he's part of a conspiracy. It's just not the conspiracy you think. So instead, the KGB theory is that Oswald is part of a militant anti-communist conspiracy group whose intent is to poison relations between the Soviet Union and the United States by killing Kennedy and framing the communists for it.
Khrushchev will say in an interview in 1964 that, in fact, Oswald was working with extremist anti-communist.
Hello, David Denton.
Many wonder if this theory is simply Soviet propaganda.
Of course, Khrushchev wants to take suspicion off of himself, but independently of the KGB, a U.S. investigator also looks into this theory.
Jim Garrison, the district attorney of New Orleans, comes to believe that a murky conspiracy involving business leaders and Lee Harvey Oswald has brought together all these right-wing anti-communist elements to kill JFK.
To prove his theory, Garrison spends 6 years interviewing witnesses.
Through the 1960s, Jim Garrison's investigation leads to a man by the name of David Ferry. Back in the 1950s, David Ferry serves in the Civil Air Patrol, which also has as a member Lee Harvey Oswald. Dave Ferry was rabidly anti-communist and heavily involved in the anti-Castro movement in New Orleans.
So you might be thinking, now wait a minute, someone who's anti-Castro should like Kennedy. But David Ferry was disappointed in Kennedy for not being staunch enough in their opposition to Castro.
He thinks that Kennedy's attempts at a peaceful outcome are weak, that he's essentially handed Cuba to the communists. In fact, he gives a fiery speech in 1961 where he says that Kennedy should be shot.
According to Garrison, Ferry follows through with that threat.
In September of 1963, a few weeks before the assassination of JFK, insurance agent named Perry Russo would state that he was at a party with a businessman from New Orleans named Clay Shaw, Lee Harvey Oswald, and David Ferry, where the assassination of JFK would be discussed.
Russo testifies that he remembers them saying that they were going to kill Kennedy and that they were going to use something called a triangulation of shooters. They also discussed alibis for the people involved in this conspiracy.
By February of 1967, Garrison is ready to reveal his finding.
Newspapers in New Orleans break Garrison's story. He's convinced that David Ferry and Lee Harvey Oswald are longtime friends since their days together in the Civil Air Patrol. He believes they want to take out Kennedy and frame the communists. David Ferry and Lee Harvey Oswald worked together to plan the assassination with the support of Clay Shaw and the help of another man behind the scenes named Guy Bannister.
Ferry and Bannister were both adamant supporters of the anti-Castro movement, which included arming people to go stage attacks in Cuba. And Ferry, as a pilot, was moving the weapons, and Bannister was supplying them. So these men did have a hard right background that involved guns. Garrison was certainly correct about that.
Garrison's theory has Bannister and Ferry as the brains behind this operation. Clay Shaw would be handling logistics and financial backing. And then in this scenario, there are two shooters involved in a crossfire. Oswald, as we know, in the book depository, and then another unnamed shooter on the grassy knoll.
Armed with the evidence, Garrison's ready for his day in court.
Oswald is already dead, and then Bannister has died of a heart attack by 1964, so there are already two alleged conspirators gone. Then something more unusual happens. Less than a week after the Garrison investigation goes public, Dave Ferry is found dead.
David Ferry is found in his apartment with two typed up suicide notes, but the autopsy finds no evidence either of suicide or of murder, and that David Ferry has died of a brain hemorrhage.
Garrison is flummoxed. He says, I suppose it could be just a weird coincidence that the night Ferry pens two suicide notes, he dies of natural causes.
On March 1st, 1967,
Kind
the
of odd.
last alleged co-conspirator alive is arrested.
Clay Shaw is finally tried in 1969, and it remains the only trial in American history associated with the assassination of JFK. But Garrison is unsuccessful, with few witnesses remaining alive and others deemed unreliable. Shaw is acquitted in 45 minutes.
10 years later, in 1979, the House Select Committee wonders publicly if justice was served.
The House Committee's final report states that they believe the Louisiana witnesses were both, quote, credible and significant, and that they were telling the truth about Ferry and Oswald's meetings in 1963.
So Garrison's theories caused for a lot of sensational reporting and a lot of excitement on the part of the public, and, maybe swayed some people in the court of public opinion. In actual court, where evidence is required, they were found to fall apart pretty quickly.
Coming up, was JFK's assassination motivated by politics or something more basic?
In the minds of some mobsters, Kennedy took $1 billion, and they've killed for a lot less.
All right, well, we know where this is going. But as far as where we just were, in New Orleans, I believe that was a very shaved down version of the Garrison investigation. My God. This History Channel stuff is just unbelievable. Unfreaking believable. All right. Next up, I'm guessing it's going to be the mafia. Here we go.
Congress
And
passed the
I'm
JFK
guessing this is
Records
the
Act
mafia.
in 1992. The act mandates the release of all files relating to the case.
So even all these decades later, people still want answers and are now hopeful that maybe we'll start to get them.
These documents aren't released all at once, but during the 1990s, millions and millions of pages of documents are made public. The law had a deadline. It said that everything in the government's files had to be made public in 2017.
Well, guess what? That does not happen. But by 2017, tens of thousands of records have been released. And one of them gets a lot of attention because it appears to confirm a long-standing theory that the mafia was involved in the assassination of JFK.
From the moment Kennedy dies, conspiracy theorists are asking the right question, which is, who wants him dead? The communists, in a lot of minds, feature really high on that list. But there's another group who might want Kennedy dead even more, and that is the Cosa Nostra, the American mafia.
In 1962, JFK, along with his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, are on a crusade to wipe out organized crime in America.
One of the biggest revenue streams the mob had, obviously, were the casinos in Cuba. The mob was kicked out of Cuba by Castro.
So they were angry with President Kennedy for not having done more. So they wanted to see Castro overthrown so they could get back into Cuba, reopen their casinos and their liquor operations and get going again. And one way of doing that might be by killing President Kennedy.
In the minds of some mobsters, Kennedy took billions of dollars out of their pockets, and they have killed for a lot less.
Wouldn't you know it, right in the middle of the Kennedy case, there's a man who could be the key to a mafia connection.
That man is Lee Harvey Oswald's killer,
Jack Ruby.
Jack Ruby was a tough guy from Chicago. Jack Rubenstein, originally a thug, pimp, moves to Dallas, opens up his nightclub there, and quickly becomes a kind of fixture among organized crime figures. He was what you would call a wannabe.
He gets these nightclubs up and running, and they become a conduit for all the things we know the mafia for. Gambling, running narcotics, and eventually sex work.
Theorists long speculated that Jack Ruby and the mafia worked together to kill Kennedy. They say by 1963, Jack Ruby is heavily indebted to the mafia, and they force him to find a patsy to assassinate the president. And afterwards, they make him kill that fall guy so that he can't talk.
A lot more evidence came out in the 1970s with the House Select Committee investigation, and that strengthened the notion that there was an organized crime connection to the assassination.
Did Ruby hire Oswald on behalf of the mafia?
Dallas police have two witnesses report that on October 4th, 1963, 7 weeks before the assassination, they see Ruby and Oswald meet in Ruby's Carousel Club on Commerce Street in Dallas. There, they argue over a large sum of money for an undisclosed job that Oswald will be doing for Ruby.
But the Warren Commission fails to interview these witnesses.
After he's arrested, Ruby denies ever having known Oswald and that he didn't know beforehand that the assassination was going to happen. Ruby says that he was
Who are these witnesses? Beverly Oliver? I don't know.
blocks away, busy placing some newspaper ads, and killed Oswald because of grief, because of patriotism, and because he felt for the First Lady and wanted to keep her from having to suffer through a prolonged trial.
For over 50 years, no one can prove otherwise.
But then in 2017, as part of another large dump of declassified Kennedy files, we see document 321-49267. It's a report from the FBI's intelligence division about Jack Ruby. In it, an informant named Bob Vanderslice says that Ruby calls him up on the day of the assassination. He asks if he, quote, would like to watch the fireworks.
Vanderslice goes with Ruby to a location right across from the Texas School Book Depository, and together they watch the president get shot. When it happens, Ruby says nothing. He just turns calmly and walks south towards the newspaper office, where he places the ads and thereby creates an alibi.
If this is true, then Jack Ruby knew there were going to be, quote, fireworks, and he knew exactly where and when the assassination was going to happen. In other words, Ruby lied, and he knew about the whole thing.
After months in custody, Ruby himself claims there's more to his story.
At first, Ruby sticks to his alibi, but then he changes his tune. He writes letters, he makes statements to police, and then even testifies to the Warren Commission that he knows some things he's not saying. But he believes that his life is in danger. He wants to tell the whole truth, but he can't unless he can get some protection from the government.
But he never gets that protection, and he dies in 1967, taking with him to the grave any potential secrets about a mafia assassination plot.
Some believe that members of the mafia worked quickly to cover their tracks after JFK's death.
Over a dozen witnesses and participants die mysteriously in the aftermath of the shooting. Oswald, Ruby, Dorothy Kilgallen. She's the only reporter to interview Jack Ruby at his trial. She then openly questions the Warren Commission and then dies of a mysterious overdose in 1965.
So, following this trail of murders, it reaches its apex in 1960.
Just an aside here. Okay. She didn't so much interview Jack Ruby as just talk to him in the courtroom. And if she had anything newsworthy, she would have printed it before she died in 1965. That's all I'm saying. They're trying to make another conspiracy out of another conspiracy out of another conspiracy. I don't believe Kilgallen knew shit, but here we go.
When Robert F. Kennedy, who also could be seen as an enemy of the mafia, is killed in Los Angeles.
What kind of organization would be willing to leave behind such a long string of bodies to keep hold of their power and their secrets? The mafia, that's who. And if they did, then it worked, because there is no one left to confirm this theory.
Coming up, what if JFK's killer was much closer to home?
Enemies high in his own government, in the CIA and Pentagon, wanted to kill the president.
So there was your mafia. And I'm guessing next up is going to be Alan Dulles and the CIA. So stay tuned for that one. And we'll be right back.
Oliver Stone's film about the Kennedy assassination,
And we're back,
JFK,
folks.
is released in theaters. Almost immediately, it causes an uproar.
The film combines a number of conspiracy theories, including the alleged New Orleans plot and the second shooter on the grassy knoll. But more important than the film's plot is the impact it has.
Just an aside here. I hope these folks realize that the Oliver Stone movie JFK is, of course, a Hollywood movie and not a documentary. But I digress. Here we go.
Has on this country.
After the film was released, we see a tidal wave of other publications associated with the JFK assassination,
Including one from a man who says he was directly involved.
Robert Morrow claimed to be a former CIA operative active in the anti-Castro movement in the 1960s, and he alleged in a book that he was asked by Tracy Barnes, a senior CIA official, to buy guns that he said were later used in the assassination.
Morrow's cast of characters in the alleged CIA plot might sound familiar.
Morrow actually names the same co-conspirators that are in the movie JFK and also those that were pursued by Jim Garrison in his New Orleans case. He claims that Clay Shaw, Guy Bannister, and Dave Ferry were helping in the operations against Castro in Cuba before the assassination.
Morrow says they also enlisted the help of the mafia through Jack Ruby. On November 22nd in Dallas, they placed 4 shooters. Oswald in the book depository, another on the grassy knoll, and 2 more, all with Morrow's rifles. The month prior, they laid some groundwork. They sent Oswald to Mexico to meet with the Cubans.
Their goal is to frame Castro for the crime and therefore bring about a full-scale invasion of Cuba. According to Morrow, the CIA wants redemption from their failed Bay of Pigs operation, and the mafia has hopes of being able to return to reopen their casinos in Cuba.
It's quite a story, a complicated CIA plot with dozens of participants. And yet, with all those people, including government agents and known criminals that are under surveillance, the Warren Commission finds no evidence that any of this actually happened.
Morrow offers a potential explanation for that as well.
Many have speculated that the Warren Commission never adequately looked into the Cuban connection or the CIA. Morrow believes that that's due to the presence on the commission of the former CIA director, Alan Dulles.
When the commission is formed,
Duh.
they don't put the current CIA director on it or anyone from the FBI. The only one on the commission with intelligence experience is Alan Dulles, who just happens to be the man that Kennedy fired from his position after the Bay of Pigs failed.
At the time of the Warren Commission, CIA involvement in the Bay of Pigs is classified.
The government didn't want that getting out. They also didn't want any information getting out related to Operation Mongoose, which at the time was top secret, but we now know was a Kennedy-sanctioned CIA operation to assassinate Castro, led by Alan Dulles.
As more documents have been declassified, more information has been revealed about the CIA. It is clear that they were withholding information from the Warren Commission, information that Alan Dulles knew and kept hidden.
Some theorists believe that information could have even saved Kennedy's life.
In 2013 and 2014, some very damaging records are released about the CIA as per the JFK Records Act. They reveal that the CIA actually knew about Oswald's trip to Mexico City before the assassination. The agency claimed to the Warren Commission that they only found out afterwards. But that was a lie.
They had an eye on Oswald since his defection to the USSR. They were reading his mail, tracking his movements. The CIA field office in Mexico City reported Oswald's meeting with the Cubans almost immediately. And the CIA had Soviet agent Valery Kostakov under surveillance during the time he was meeting with Oswald.
Does that mean the CIA killed Kennedy? No, absolutely not. But should the CIA have known that Oswald was a threat? Yes, they probably should have. And could an earlier intervention have prevented Oswald from killing the president? Again, I would say the answer is yes.
In a now declassified 2013...
Evie. Please learn the word allegedly. Thank you.
report, CIA historian David Robarch finds that the agency is complicit in keeping incendiary information from the Warren Commission. He says they intended to keep the commission focused on, quote, what the agency believed was the best truth, that Lee Harvey Oswald had acted alone in killing John Kennedy.
I think all of the most credible evidence suggests that Lee Harvey Oswald fired the bullets that killed President Kennedy, that he probably is the only gunman. But whether or not other people knew, whether or not...
This is Phil Shannon, by the way.
Those are mysteries that will probably linger forever.
The National Archives recently released thousands of newly declassified documents. Now almost all of these nearly 5 million pages are available to the public. Perhaps they will provide some closure to this enduring mystery. I'm Lawrence Fishburne. Thank you for watching History's Greatest Mysteries.
Oh. All right, folks. So there you have it. The History Channel's History's Greatest Mysteries. Not impressed. Not a fan. Well, I'm a fan of Evie Pomperous, but that's besides the point. For different reasons. Not impressed with the cast of characters they had on here to speak about this. Obviously, there was a narrative story that they wanted to weave in and out of here, obviously. This is why I would never, ever acquiesce to doing something like this for an entity like the History Channel or any kind of mainstream television news outlet. Because I guarantee you that they interviewed Jefferson Morley, David Denton. Those are really the only two, quote, conspiracy guys that are in this thing for hours about a myriad, of different topics. And then they cherry picked and chose who they went with for certain scenarios for the story that they're telling. Now, these podcasters and professors and God bless her heart, Evie Pompers. Why they chose them to bring them into this conversation, I don't know. If they thought they would be good parrots, or something like this. I mean, Phil Shannon, that's a no-brainer. Why to bring that guy in there? Because he'll toe the company line and the official narrative for sure. But even though you might mean well, in the end, you're contributing to a piece of shit, a piece of dying, dingy dog shit. I wouldn't even waste my time. It's not even worth the effort. Because when you have something like this that propagates itself as some kind of a conspiracy, edgy, unsolved mystery, type of thing, but in reality, there is a narrative flowing through the hour special that we just listened to. And that is basically throwing up ridiculous theories in your face to show how ridiculous conspiracy theories and theorists are, debunking, an official investigation and and the Garrison investigation, just out of hand. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And, to sit here and say that we should be happy enough to get what we got out of their JFK records released and not demand, because I'm sure Morley had a lot more to say on this subject than they let him say. In fact, I don't even think he got to address the JFK Records Act portion of this. But according to the other folks, hey, they've released 5 million records and we should be thankful for that. And, in these records, this is what things were said and this is what we can glean from it and da 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 da. When in fact that whole Jack Ruby and fireworks thing, it's been around since the 90s. Okay, it wasn't just some miraculously released thing in 2017. So, I just don't know where all that's coming from. And I apologize if there is a weird metallic kind of undertone to the way I'm speaking and the way you're hearing me. I don't know exactly what it is. With the setup here, maybe I've got something too close together or something else. I don't know. But in any effect, I hope, you enjoyed the show. And I just wanted to highlight that as another example of the mainstream media and mainstream TV outlets perverting and distorting conspiracy research into the assassination. And this is what average Joe sitting on his couch, drinking a beer, flipping through channels sees. They don't see the truth. This is what they see. They see what they want us to see. That's it. There is no, at least mainstream special that I've seen so far that actually does it any kind of justice. But we get what we get, folks. And that's the most recent of what we got. But anyway, that's it for this week. And hopefully, coming up soon, we're going to have some more, like I alluded to here, about possibly 2 versus 3 bullets. Maybe some Perry Russo hypnotized sessions. I don't know. Depends on what I feel like doing. But anyway, follow along on TikTok at the Lone Gunman 7 and on Twitter at the Lone Gunman 7 and on the Facebook page, the Lone Gunman Podcast, and YouTube. Search for the Lone Gunman Podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share all the above media. Leave a 5-star review for your boy if you like where you listen. I would greatly appreciate it. Till next time, peace.